League of Legends is a huge game, capable of giving thousands of hours of entertainment, and one of the coolest esports experiences in the world. However, there is a drawback to this, a huge amount of rules and information that could be comparable to almost a textbook, so getting in can be a little intimidating. Fortunately, most of the gameplay can be understood by knowing something quite simple: classes and positions. Now that we know the basics of League of Legends and how the combination of a class and a position make up the whole player, let's discover the mechanics that define the whole class system, both the world of subclasses and the wiring that connects all classes together. First, let's see what lies under the scheme of the 6 classes. There are more than 140 different champions, so grouping all of them into only 6 classes wouldn't be able to explain the reality behind all of them. That's the reason why we have subclasses, subdivisions of classes that explain how champions behave in a more detailed manner. Both mages and fighters are divided into 3 subclasses, while tanks and controllers are divided into 2. Lastly, marksmen and assassins do not have any subclasses. So, well, let's dive into each of them. Tanks are divided into 2 subclasses, vanguards and wardens. Vanguards are audacious titans that rush into the fight and absorb damage for their allies. They are the standard tanks, as they are focused on aggressive engages and initiation. However, their ability to protect their allies once the enemies are into them is not especially good. Wardens are trustworthy guardians that protect their allies from incoming threats. Opposite of vanguards, wardens are focused on the defensive disengages and protection of allies. There is a price to pay for this though, and it is their very limited means of initiating fights. Sometimes this defensive power comes in the form of utility, so you can think of them as a mix between tanks and controllers. You can picture these subclasses as a line gradient, with the subclasses on the extreme. Even though there will be some champions that completely fit these 2 archetypes, most tanks are actually somewhere in between. Mages are divided into 3 subclasses: artillery, battle, and burst mages. Burst mages are reckless conjurers that unleash explosive arcane magic and destroy enemies in the blink of an eye. They are the standard mages, and they are focused in bursting enemies from range. Their main disadvantage is that once their combo is used, their contribution to the fight is not very meaningful. Battle mages are skillful spellslingers that burn down enemies with constant barrages of magic. They are mages that focus on dealing sustained damage to the enemy, but their burst potential is not that threatening. You could say they are what lies in between mages and marksmen. And finally, artillery mages are wise warlocks that cast damaging spells into the fight safely from far away. They are special mages that have huge range and can harass enemies from much farther away than other mages. However, their damage patterns are intermittent and neither burst nor sustain, but a mix of both that characterizes their playstyle, chipping down the enemy's health through poke without direct fights. For mages, you can picture these subclasses as a triangle gradient, with the subclasses on the extremes, with its defining characteristic: extreme range, burst damage, and sustained damage. Even though there will be some champions that completely fit into one of these 3 archetypes, most champions are actually somewhere in the gradient between these. Controllers are divided into 2 subclasses: catchers and enchanters. Catchers are sly disruptors that find nukes in the enemy's defense and capitalize on them. They are aggressive controllers focused on disrupting the enemy and exposing them so their allies can't damage them. Their weakness, their ability to protect and buff allies, is not their biggest strength. Enchanters are kind clairvoyants that cast defensive magic on allies to heal, shield, and empower them. They are defensive controllers focused on empowering their allies and protecting them from the enemy, but they struggle at having a real impact on the enemy team by themselves. Just as with tanks, you can picture these subclasses as a line gradient, with the subclasses on the extremes. Some champions will be almost 100% into one of the subclasses, but most controllers are actually somewhere in the middle. Fighters are divided into 3 subclasses: divers, juggernauts, and slayers. Juggernauts are heavy warlords that crush anything that gets close to them. They are the standard fighter, focused in dealing great deals of sustained damage and resisting huge amounts of damage, but their limited mobility makes harass from range their biggest weakness. Slayers are nimble duelists that dash through a battle, destroying their enemies while smoothly avoiding damage. These deadly fighters have amazing mobility and incredible potential for damage, but are quite fragile, and have to be extra careful if they don't want to die in the heat of the battle. You could see Slayers as what lies in between fighters and marksmen. Divers are brave heroes that jump into the fray and fight for their team. They are very well-rounded fighters, being pretty tough, having great mobility with which they can initiate fights, and damage capabilities. It's only natural that being the jack of all trades makes them master of none, and they are not as damaging as the other fighters. You could picture divers as a mix between fighters and tanks. As it happened with mages, you can picture these subclasses as a triangle gradient, with the subclasses on the extreme, but with each side representing a characteristic: high damage, toughness and mobility. You can have two of them sacrificing the other one, or as it happens with most fighters, be a quite difficult to quantify combination of these three stats. Neither marksmen nor assassins have subclasses, as their job is already pretty polarized, so you could say that they are their own subclass. If you want to double check what's their role in a match, be sure to check the previous video. And if that's not enough, there is still something more. For the most special champions that behave in truly singular ways, there's the unique tag. While they do belong to a certain class, unique champions behave in unconventional ways that are different from what you would expect from their class. For example, Gangplank is a fighter, but his playstyle revolves around creating chain explosions from range with powder barrels. Kayle is a marksman that starts the game as a melee champion, and Singed is a tank that does most of his job by just walking and running? Not many champions have the unique tag, but you can be sure that if a champion has it, they will bring unexpected things to the Summoner's Rift. And that's all for subclasses. However, just like we said with classes, champions aren't limited nor restricted by their class, and depending on how you play, anything can work. This system doesn't limit players' possibilities, but gives us better tools to analyze champions, matchups, and strategies. Most of the relations between classes can be understood by knowing the relations between damage and resistances. First, Burst beats Sustain. Burst can deal a high amount of damage in a short amount of time, while Sustain damage needs time to equal that damage output. And even though Sustain will eventually beat Burst, they are eliminated before they have time. However, when fighting against tough opponents, Burst damage often falls short, not reaching enough damage to kill them. Once their spells are used, their damage output heavily slows down until they are available again, a window of time in which tough opponents can eliminate them. And then it's where sustained damage kicks back in. They are the ones that can get through the protections of tough enemies, beating them in long encounters, while tough enemies can match their damage or their range. With this system, we can see the correspondence of these three characteristics into the classes system. However, this shouldn't be taken as an infallible rule, because the way in which you play the situation will be the true deciding factor in any game. For this classification, two choices have been made differently from the official one, but as this can get a bit too technical, the full details about this are down in the description below. And that's it for classes in depth. I hope you found this video useful and not too overbearing, because, to be honest, there are a lot of concepts in here. However, if you still want to know more and more about all of this, is there actually more? In the next video, we will have a look at the bottom lane and the most common misconceptions about both of their positions, the bot laner and the support. There is also plenty of material in the description, such as the full list for champion classes and subclasses, recommended champions, further explanation about the classification and more, so be sure to check them out. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video or found it interesting, please like this video, leave me a comment and subscribe for more. If you know someone who is starting at League of Legends, please send this video their way, maybe it can help them. Thank you so much for watching this video and hope to see you in the next one. See ya!